The midday sun shone upon King's Landing with a brilliance that made the waters of Blackwater Bay glitter like scattered diamonds. From his vantage on the Red Keep's balcony, Oberyn Martell felt the warmth on his face and inhaled the sharp tang of salt in the air. He was a prince of Dorne and had once believed that after he'd slain the mountain and forced the man's dying confession regarding Elia Martell, the burning fire in his soul might finally simmer. But that thirst for justice had only sharpened into a broader ambition. He'd come to see just how rotten King's Landing truly was. Too many lords and ladies jockeyed for power, Tywin Lannister still maneuvered behind every tapestry, and the powerless King Tommen was but a child among lions. Oberyn could sense the realm's tensions growing like storm clouds on the horizon. Somewhere across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen was raising armies, forging alliances, and, if rumors were to be believed, rearing dragons that had hatched in the red waste of Essos. Men whispered that she had freed the enslaved cities of Astapor, Yunkai, and Meereen, forging her own kingdom across the sea. If she ever returned to Westeros to reclaim her birthright, would she prove just and strong, or would she mirror the madness of her father, the so-called Mad King? For Oberyn, that question had become more than a matter of idle curiosity. He had begun to receive secret word from Essos about the Targaryen queen. Initially, these dispatches came through contacts among the sailors, the Dornish merchant fleet, and unscrupulous captains willing to trade in more than just goods. Over time, those whispered rumors solidified into something more tangible. A notion that Daenerys Targaryen was not just gathering power, but that she was eager to forge ties with those in Westeros who might support her cause. And Oberyn, ever mindful that Elia Martell had once been wed to Rhaegar Targaryen, found his heart stirring with the possibility of aiding Rhaegar's sister in reclaiming the Iron Throne. He turned from the balcony, the sunlight casting a golden sheen across his dark hair and lightly bronzed features. Inside his chambers, Ellaria Sand lounged upon a cushioned divan, sipping chilled water scented with lemon. She looked up as he entered. The tension in her eyes had not faded since his victory in the trial by combat. In King's Landing, victory bred new dangers. "Is there any news from your contacts?" Ellaria asked softly, knowing full well that Oberyn had begun weaving a clandestine network within the city and beyond. Oberyn nodded. "Yes, a ship from Volantis arrived last night bearing a sealed letter. Word from Daenerys Targaryen's court, her advisors at least." There was a hushed excitement in his tone. "She sees me as a potential ally, Ellaria. She remembers that Elia Martell was her sister-in-law. She wants the Seven Kingdoms to recall the loyalty Dorne once offered the Targaryens." Ellaria's eyes flickered with a complex mix of curiosity and caution. "So it's begun," she murmured. "How far are you willing to go in the name of Targaryen restoration?" Oberyn exhaled slowly. In truth, the question haunted him. Was he chasing an echo of Elia's past? He remembered how his sister had once loved Rhaegar, how that had ended in tragedy during Robert's rebellion. Yet Daenerys was not Rhaegar and times had changed. Still, the realm might be better served by a queen who rose from the ashes of injustice to champion freedom. The Lannisters had done nothing but hoard power in a rotting capital. "I'm not certain yet," he admitted. "But if Daenerys Targaryen intends to claim the Iron Throne, perhaps we can ensure that House Martell's vengeance and Dorne's autonomy are woven into the new order. Her letter suggests she's open to negotiations." Ellaria nodded, sipping her water thoughtfully. "And Tyrion Lannister? He's aware of any of this?" At the mention of Tyrion, Oberyn felt a flicker of respect. Since the trial by combat that had proved Tyrion's innocence, a cautious friendship had grown between them. For all that he was a Lannister, Tyrion was the one lion who carried the weight of empathy and intellect. His father, Tywin, might be the realm's most imposing strategist, but Tyrion possessed a different kind of brilliance. A quick wit, a keen mind for politics, and an underdog's sense of justice. "I suspect he'll be integral," Oberyn said. "Tyrion despises his father's cruelty. He's also practical. If the winds shift in favor of Daenerys, Tyrion will see it. But I must move carefully. If Tywin even suspects I'm in touch with Daenerys Targaryen, he'll have me hanged for treason." Ellaria set her cup aside and rose to stand before Oberyn. placing her hands on his chest. "Be careful, Oberyn. Dorne needs you. Our daughters need you. This alliance could change the entire realm, but it could also tear you apart." He leaned down to kiss her forehead. "I know, but destiny rarely comes without risk." And so the seeds of a new plot were sown. Over the next several weeks, Oberyn expanded his secret communications with Daenerys' camp, using a handful of trusted go-betweens, smugglers, disguised merchants, and even a red priest who occasionally traveled from Volantis to King's Landing. Through coded letters, Oberyn and Daenerys exchanged reports. She described the challenges of ruling Meereen, of uniting freedmen with former masters, and the ever-shifting tapestry of Essosi politics. Oberyn conveyed the state of Westeros, the tensions in the north, the Tyrell Lannister alliance by marriage, and the precarious nature of Tommen's rule. Across each secret dispatch, they tested each other. Daenerys wanted assurance that Dorne wouldn't betray her if she sailed west with her dragons. Oberyn, in turn, wanted to know if she truly stood for justice or merely sought a personal crown. Over time, a certain mutual respect grew, each shaped by personal loss and an awareness that the old power structures of Westeros had failed. Neither was naive. They both knew that forging a partnership would require careful steps and cunning deals. The notion of raising King's Landing became a cryptic shorthand for their ambitions. In coded language, Oberyn referred to our mutual desire to see the city raised to a new standard, an elliptical way of saying they would rebuild or raise it if necessary, but in either case, tear down the Lannisters' iron grip on the throne. The idea that Tyrion Lannister might be an ally in this enterprise emerged gradually. References to the lion cub with a golden mind dotted Oberyn's letters, while Daenerys responded with curiosity about the imp, whose wit and decency were rumored to overshadow his family's cruelty. Meanwhile, within King's Landing itself, Oberyn's position had become formidable and perilous. The small folk adored the Prince of Dorne for slaying the monstrous Gregor Clegane. Those in the Red Keep who loathed Tywin or feared Cersei gravitated toward Oberyn's orbit, hoping he might offer them a path to oust Lannister influence. The Tyrells, ever watchful, occasionally aligned with Oberyn in small council debates, though neither side acknowledged any official alliance. But Tywin was no fool. Oberyn could feel the old lion's gaze tracking him through every corridor. Jaime Lannister, in his capacity as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, grew more reserved around Oberyn, seldom engaging him unless necessary. Cersei seethed openly, occasionally making veiled jibes about foreigners who think they can outsmart the lion's den. Only Tyrion, ironically enough, provided something akin to genuine camaraderie. The imp often visited Oberyn's chambers, or Oberyn would find Tyrion in one of the Red Keep's lesser-known libraries, deep in books or sipping fine Dornish reds. They would discuss court intrigues, the North, the Iron Bank, or even idle gossip about which lords might next betray which. Slowly but surely, Oberyn tested the waters, dropping occasional mentions of the Targaryen cause, gauging Tyrion's reaction. One evening, after they'd shared half a flagon of excellent Arbor Gold, Oberyn ventured a candid question. "Lord Tyrion, if Daenerys Targaryen lands on our shores with an army and 3 dragons, would you side with her?" Tyrion's mismatched eyes flicked up, curiosity playing on his face. They were alone in a small drawing room off the library. Illyria had retired, and no servants were present. "That's quite a hypothetical," Tyrion said, swirling his wine. "I suppose it depends on what Daenerys Targaryen stands for, and whether her claim is supported by men of principle. Or women of principle, for that matter." Oberyn leaned back against the cushioned seat. "I have it on reasonably good authority she desires to restore her family's throne, but also to break the cycles of brutality in the realm. She's freed slaves in Essos, if the rumors are to be believed. Many call her Mysa, mother." A small chuckle escaped Tyrion. "Yes, I've heard the tales. A young woman with silver-gold hair, leading freedmen and once enemies alike, forging a new society in Meereen. It sounds like a story from the old heroic lays, doesn't it?" "Perhaps," Oberyn said softly. "Or perhaps she's a true contender for the throne. If so, King's Landing would be in grave danger if she arrives unopposed." Tyrion frowned, his brow creasing. "In truth, I've grown weary of the game we play here. My father, well, he sees everything and everyone as pieces on his board. My sister is no better. And the king is a boy with barely any agency. He hesitated before taking another sip of wine. If Daenerys Targaryen truly stands a chance, and if she truly wants a more just reign, I would consider supporting her. Depending on the circumstances, of course. But if she intends to burn the city to the ground, I'm not sure I can cheer for that. Oberyn's dark eyes gleamed. Sometimes old corrupt structures must be burned away before something new can be built. But I take your meaning. No one wants to see innocents perish in flames. They let the subject drop. But that night, while Tyrion slept off the wine and Oberyn paced the balcony, the Dornish prince felt his convictions deepen. If Daenerys could be won over to a vision of justice, if the new queen and House Martell could collaborate, the realm might be saved from the worst of Lannister oppression. And if Tyrion could be convinced to back her, well, that might be the wedge that finally cracked Tywin's power from within. A secret exchange. Shortly thereafter, Oberyn received a startling message by way of a Volantene trader newly docked in King's Landing. The man, clad in saffron robes, delivered a small scroll bearing a black wax seal. Inside, Daenerys Targaryen's words were scrawled in a flowing yet bold script. Prince Oberyn, I have learned of your victory over the man who killed my sister-in-law, Princess Elia. The realm owes you a debt for finally bringing some measure of justice to House Martell. If I ever come to Westeros, I would hope we might stand as allies. I have also heard that Tyrion Lannister is a man of wit and decency, despite his surname. I am told he is the only Lannister who might see beyond the lion's pride. If such is true, and if you speak for his character, then I would have him by my side rather than see him condemned with the rest of his family. There is much we must discuss. If the day comes when my banner flies over King's Landing, I will remember who aided me, and I will remember those who chose to bar my path. Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen Oberyn felt a twinge of excitement. Not only had Daenerys made her intentions clearer, she actively sought Tyrion Lannister's support. Now came the tricky part. How to bring Tyrion into the fold without alerting Tywin or, worse, Cersei. Oberyn suspected Tyrion had no love for either father or sister, but lines of loyalty could be thin and complicated. He penned a swift reply in coded phrases. References to the fields in the summer sea are ripe for harvest, meaning the realm was ready for a Targaryen claimant, and entrusted it to the Volantene trader for the return voyage. Then, after a sleepless night, he decided it was time to share more openly with Tyrion. If the imp was truly an ally, best to bring him properly into the conspiracy. If not, well, Oberyn would learn soon enough. He chose a meeting place in a dusty library rarely visited by anyone. The books there were mostly old records of harvests, local genealogies, and other mundane accounts. Among those unremarkable tomes, Oberyn awaited Tyrion's arrival with the same subtle tension he'd once felt upon stepping into the arena to face Gregor Clegane. At last, Tyrion entered, scanning the shelves with the faint glow of interest that always sparked in him around books. "You picked a quiet spot," Tyrion observed, closing the door carefully behind him. Two of Oberyn's guards waited outside, ensuring no uninvited guests. Oberyn nodded. "We need privacy for what I'm about to reveal." Tyrion arched a brow, curiosity piqued. "Very well. I'm listening." Oberyn reached into the pouch at his belt and withdrew a thin roll of parchment, the letter from Daenerys Targaryen. He held it out to Tyrion without a word. As Tyrion read, his face tightened in surprise, then flickered through a range of emotions. Intrigue, worry, and something like hope. "She wants me to serve as an advisor?" Tyrion murmured. "Well, that's a twist." "Indeed," Oberyn said. "Daenerys Stormborn. She believes you would be more valuable at her side than rotting under the shadow of Tywin Lannister. Or perhaps rotting in a cell if your father grows tired of you." Tyrion's laugh was mirthless. "He already sentenced me to die once, albeit under the guise of justice. I doubt he's softened his stance. But allying with the last Targaryen across the sea, that's treason, Prince Oberyn. Even I'm not naive enough to overlook the dangers." Oberyn placed a hand on Tyrion's shoulder. "The entire realm teeters on the edge of ruin. The Lannisters can't keep it together forever. The North is in chaos. The Ironborn raid the coasts, and the Tyrells chafe under Tywin's rule. Perhaps Daenerys is the answer. Tyrion studied the letter once more, then closed his eyes briefly. She freed slaves in Astapor, Yunkai, and Meereen. At least that's what we hear. She might be a just ruler, but she also has dragons, real dragons that can burn cities to ash. If she arrives and decides to become the second coming of Aegon the Conqueror, we could see King's Landing go up in flames. Is that any worse than letting Tywin and Cersei tear the realm apart through cruelty and greed? Oberyn asked quietly. Tyrion shook his head. I'm not certain, but if my father and sister remain in power, it will only breed more misery. Perhaps Daenerys is a gamble worth taking. He opened his eyes, fixing a searching look upon Oberyn. Tell me truthfully, do you trust her? Trust is a strong word, Oberyn said, folding his arms. I respect her. I believe she has a sincere desire for justice, though I'm sure she also has her ambition. But if Elia Martell taught me anything, it's that Targaryens can be complicated. Some are noble, some are monstrous. Daenerys, I believe, has it within her to be a better queen than we've had in decades, if she's guided properly. Tyrion weighed that. He glanced back at the letter, then tucked it in his breast pocket. So, what would you have me do? For now, nothing overt. I'll maintain the exchange of letters with her. Once she is ready to set sail, or if circumstances in King's Landing worsen, we'll decide our next move. Meanwhile, I want you at my side, observing, advising. You see the inner workings of your father's court better than most. When the time is right, we may have to flee the city or even orchestrate something from within. A grim smile touched Tyrion's lips. Let the world brand us traitors if we must. If Daenerys Stormborn can indeed deliver us from the madness of my family, I'll consider it. Thus, the unspoken alliance began in earnest. Oberyn Martell, Tyrion Lannister, and Daenerys Targaryen. Three figures bound by grudges against the Lannisters' tyranny, by a desire to reclaim lost honor, or a chance at shaping a new realm. Rumors began swirling in King's Landing. Little whispers in taverns, among the gold cloaks, and within the labyrinth halls of the Red Keep. The talk was of Daenerys Targaryen's conquests in Slaver's Bay, how she commanded 3 growing dragons, and how the populace in those eastern cities proclaimed her a liberator. Some cynics scoffed, saying the Dragon Queen would never leave Essos. Others predicted she would arrive with an army that outnumbered the entire City Watch. But one matter was certain. The Lannisters, especially Cersei, were alarmed. Tyrion, tasked with overseeing certain aspects of the royal finances, quietly noted that Tywin funneled more gold into strengthening the royal fleet and the city's defenses. Blacksmiths were commissioned to produce more Scorpion ballistae, massive siege weapons that might pierce a dragon's hide. Alchemists whispered about wildfire reserves. The crown sought new alliances with the Stormlords, offering them titles and gold in exchange for loyalty. Even the High Sparrow, who was rising in influence among the commoners, found himself courted by Lannister envoys. They needed the faith's blessing to maintain legitimacy. Oberyn, meanwhile, continued his dance in the small council, politely stalling or redirecting certain initiatives that would strengthen Lannister power. He utilized his alliance with the Tyrells wherever possible, albeit covertly. Lady Olenna Tyrell suspected something bigger might be afoot, but Oberyn refrained from sharing all details. For now, only Tyrion knew the heart of the matter, that Oberyn was exchanging letters with Daenerys. Each letter from Daenerys or her advisors carried subtle updates on her situation. She was consolidating her hold on Meereen, warding off intrigues from the other free cities. But she also grew restless, wanting to cross the narrow sea sooner rather than later. She inquired if Oberyn could rally Dorne fully to her cause when she landed. Oberyn responded that Dorne would never forget Elia Martell's murder, and that many Dornish nobles would welcome a Targaryen queen, especially if she acknowledged Dorne's distinctive rights and provided restitution for old wounds. They toyed with the concept of a marriage alliance, or at least a formal treaty, to cement Martell Targaryen ties. Daenerys was not averse, but the letters never pinned down the specifics. as she needed to gauge whether an alliance with Dorne alone would suffice to unseat the Lannisters. It became a question of timing. Tyrion urged caution, citing that if Daenerys invaded prematurely, Tywin would rally the realm against her, spreading fear of dragons and foreign armies. But if she waited too long, Tywin might discover Oberyn and Tyrion's machinations, or the city might splinter under other pressures. The realm, Oberyn noted wryly, was like a tinderbox waiting for a spark. Around this time, an event occurred that raised the stakes further. Varys vanished. The Master of Whisperers, who had so often glided in the shadows, discreetly left the city under circumstances unknown. Some rumored that Varys had been discovered plotting treason. Others said he feared Cersei's wrath. Tyrion suspected Varys might be heading across the narrow sea to Daenerys, but there was no confirmation. In Varys's absence, the flow of intelligence became less predictable, allowing Tywin more freedom to operate in the dark. Oberyn worried that they'd lost a valuable source of covert knowledge.